Hi everyone, thanks for joining. We'll give a minute or so for more people to join in before we begin. All right, well, it looks like we've got a fair few people joined now, so we'll begin on time. So good morning and welcome everyone to the webinar to discuss sustainable aviation fuel for the Australian sugar industry. This webinar is being held as a part of a project managed at Queensland University of Technology, or QUT, with funding from Sugar Research Australia and co-supervision from Jane Trindle at SRA. So I'd first like to start by acknowledging the traditional country from the many places we are dialing in from today. So at QUT and in Brisbane, we acknowledge the Turrbal and Yugara as the First Nations owners of the lands where the university now stands. We pay respect to their elders, laws, customs and creation spirits. Thanks for joining us online today. I'll quickly make everyone aware that this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be made available in the coming days. So for those who don't know me, my name's Madi Smith and I'm leading a project at QUT looking at how the sugar industry can benefit from diversified product streams within the bioeconomy. So I have a background in biological research, specifically in synthetic biology, and I first became involved with SRA through a master's degree at QUT, which was funded by an SRA postgraduate scholarship. So this project, I engineered microbes to produce high-value chemicals from sugarcane byproducts. So it's really exciting today to be able to put on this event and explore sustainable aviation fuels, which is a bioproduct market with significant momentum in Queensland. So all right, before we kick off, I'll invite Professor Ian O'Hara, the Deputy Dean of Faculty of Engineering here at QUT, and the Queensland Biofutures Industry Envoy to introduce the theme of today's webinar. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Maddie. And I also would like to welcome everyone to this webinar, and in which we're going to explore what's happening in the very exciting field of sustainable aviation fuels and explore opportunities for the sugar industry to participate in this exciting area. So if you have a passing interest in aviation, you might have picked up on some of the interest in sustainable aviation fuels, or SAF as we'll call it, over the past few months and in fact few years. You may have heard recently about the Australian Government establishing a Jet Zero Council to support the aviation industry to achieve net zero emissions through SAF and other emerging technologies. You may have heard about the plans by the airlines such as Qantas and Airbus to invest to accelerate the development of a SAF industry in Australia. A couple of years ago, you may have flown on one of the nearly 1,000 flights that left Brisbane Airport fuelled by SAF during the Virgin trial with partners including the Queensland Government, Brisbane Airport Corporation, Caltex and DB Schenker. You may have heard about the US government's grand challenge to scale up to 12 billion litres per year by 2030 and 120 billion litres per year of SAF by 2050. So there is certainly a lot going on, but how real is this opportunity? And in particular, what are the opportunities for the sugar industry? How can the sugar industry participate in these emerging SAF supply chains? Well, the sugar industry has identified SAF as a key opportunity for the industry through their Sugar Plus roadmap, and it's been shown to have the potential to contribute to revenue diversification. And in fact, the sugar industry could be a significant contributor to a domestic aviation SAF industry. So what do we know about SAF? Well, international aviation is responsible for over 2% of all global carbon dioxide emissions. SAF has been shown to reduce carbon dioxide emissions by up to 80% compared to fossil fuels. Given our dispersed population centres and distance from other countries in Australia, our tourism, business and trade sectors are critically dependent on aviation. There are 7 certified pathways for producing SAF, and 3 or 4 of these are highly relevant to sugarcane-derived feedstocks. Hundreds of thousands of flights have flown successfully with SAF fuels all around the world. And while we may see some innovation in electric planes for short-haul flights, there are very limited opportunities or alternative options, very limited alternative options to SAF for long-haul aviation. And the sugarcane industry has a significant opportunity to provide feedstocks for the SAF industry, which can support demand for products of sugarcane and contribute to the industry's future profitability. So with that short summary, I'm really looking forward to today's webinar. We've got a great panel of experts, and I'll hand back to Madi to introduce the panel.
Thanks, Ian. So with that as a starting point for our discussion today, I'd like to introduce today's panel. So we have a great group of experts who will share with us their perspectives on SAF and the opportunities to create a thriving SAF industry in Queensland and the role the sugar industry can play in this. So the format for the panel will be that each panellist will have 5 to 7 minutes for some introductory comments, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So please feel free to submit a question at any point today during the webinar using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. So I'll introduce each of the speakers first, and then we'll move through the speakers in turn for their self-introduction. So our first panellist today is probably a familiar face for a lot of you. It's Hywel Cook. Hywel is the General Manager of Industry Services at Sugar Research Australia. He's had over 30 years' experience in the sugar industry, working across refineries, sugar mills, and cane growing and business development sectors. Our second panellist is Ed Mason. Ed is the founder and managing director of Jet Zero Australia. Ed is leading Jet Zero in plans to develop Australia's first alcohol-to-jet fuel facility, taking agricultural bioproducts on the east coast of Australia and converting them to ethanol and then sustainable aviation fuel via a plant to be built in Queensland. Our third panellist is Andrea Paulson. Andrea is the marketing director at Licella Holdings. Andrea is on the leadership team developing the first commercial-scale advanced recycling facility in Australia to use Licella's pioneering catalytic hydrothermal reactor platform, which takes biomass to sustainable oil, a direct substitute for fossil crude. Our final panellist today is David Wren. As many of you may know, David is the Director of Economics, Policy and Trade at the Australian Sugar Milling Council. His role includes development and implementation of the sector's trade and energy strategies, sugar market economic analysis and policy development and engagement on a broad range of issues, including revenue diversification and sustainability. So I'll now pass over to Hywel to introduce himself.
Yeah, hi. Yes, I'm Hywel Cook, the General Manager Industry Services at Sugar Research Australia. Prior to working here, I worked for MSF Sugar, Queensland Sugar Limited and CSR. So I've got a sort of a diverse background in the industry, yeah, really excited to talk about this topic today. But really, where I want to start, it all starts with the raw material. A lot of the discussion I've heard recently when discussing the new green economy always talks about the end product, which we will do today. However, I think we need to turn this discussion around and start talking about how the raw material can be used in making products such as sustainable aviation fuel. Sugarcane is a versatile and sustainable raw material. It is a quick-growing biomass crop which is resilient and grows in tropical and subtropical regions. Add sun, water and fertiliser in the right amounts and you get up to 40 tonnes of very useful sugar and dry biomass per hectare per year. I don't know of any other crop that does that. Sugar Research Australia, research through our cane breeding program, has focused on developing sugarcane which grows well across northern New South Wales and Queensland and allows sugar mills to separate sugarcane into its key components of sucrose and fibre, which fits well into the current industry raw sugar model. What I mean is that we grow sugarcane to have high levels of sucrose to make raw sugar and the right amount of fibre to allow the cane to be milled efficiently and to supply energy to run the sugar mill. But I don't think this is the only product we could make using the infrastructure we already have in place. The two ways that we're going to talk about making SAF today could and will fit into the existing industry model with some modifications. But should we as an industry be asking if we could improve on what we do to enable all current sectors growing through to milling of our industry to benefit from a SAF industry? The two areas of research I think which will be important, and this is not a full list, is farming systems. What is the best use of cane trash and bagasse? Can we use it both as a trash blanket and as a feedstock for SAF? If we collect trash, how much do we need to leave behind to maintain a benefit from a trash blanket? Some growers currently collect about half their trash and sell it as a garden mulch. But is that the right amount? Do we change to a whole of crop harvesting system and separate the trash from the cane at the mill before milling? This has been tried before, but the market and financial drivers have changed. And with that, maybe things that we've tried in the past are now relevant for the future, as the market for the different parts of the sugarcane have different and higher commercial values. The second area, I think, is cane varieties. The current varieties are focused on sugar production. The current varieties do have good quantities of fibre, and if the economics make sense, then a sugar mill can be reconfigured to improve energy efficiency to make more bagasse available for other reasons other than supplying energy to run the sugar mill. Currently, we do that to make electricity to export to the grid. However, do we look at something new? The term energy cane is used to describe sugarcane, which has higher biomass, but lower sugar content than traditional sugarcane varieties. These could be sugarcanes with a fibre above 20%, but sucrose closer to 10%. This energy cane would need some new investment in the industry to be able to process the higher fibre sugarcane. But as an industry, should we be investing in research to develop this sugarcane which will fit into both a sugar and a SAF model? Is it even possible? We think it is. We're aware of energy canes being developed around the world. For example, New Seed have some interesting clones which are being trialled in Brazil. From what we're hearing at the moment, it fits well into a second generation ethanol model that could then be used to make SAF, but it doesn't fit into a sugar/ethanol to SAF model. What this means is that the sugarcane juice purity is too low to be processed in a traditional sugar mill to produce raw sugar. And as an industry, we have raw sugar should be a high value product, and we have many customers who still want that product. The Australian Research Council Transformation Hub for Engineering Plants to replace fossil fuel, which is partly funded by SRA and led through UQ, are researching to see if we're able to modify the sugarcane plant to better suit biochemical processing. This is a longer term but exciting area of research, but it's not ready yet. SRA may have something closer to market, however. SRA has some clones which have been developed as part of our current breeding program as a way of increasing genetic gain into our new commercial varieties. These clones are higher in biomass, higher in fibre, but lower in sugar content. As they are being developed for the purpose of crossbreeding, we have not progressed them through to the final stages of the breeding program, as we're not currently breeding for commercial energy canes. We have very strong ideas of how to progress this further, but it generally does need general industry support. The summary of where we're at in the industry is that the industry has the raw material available from growing sugarcane to be the feedstock for a SAF industry. However, some targeted research may enable the industry to increase the available supply of sustainable sugarcane that may be able to produce both raw sugar and SAF from our current farmers and mills. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Hal. I'll now pass on to Ed.
Thanks, Maddie. Ed Mason, CEO of Jet Zero Australia. We're a bioenergy company, 100% focused on the manufacture of SAF. We have strong partners and investors, includes Qantas and Airbus, the Queensland Government, who gave us some grant funding to get the business going, and our technology partner, LanzaJet. We also have several institutional funds, collectively run about $3 to $4 billion, that are keen to follow this project and business all the way through to production. And we recently appointed Barrenjoey Barclays as our financial advisors to pull together the finance for our first SAF project, which we announced last week. We're signing a license agreement on for Townsville. Next slide. When I started this early on, there was a lot of doubt and uncertainty around the SAF market. Some good friends who are cane farmers, rolled their eyes. Here we go again in biofuels, and this will fizz out potentially like everything else we've seen in biofuels over the last 20 years. But whether you believe it or not, SAF is here and it's here to stay. We've seen governments around the world mandate its usage. In Europe, they've committed to a blend by 2025 from all flights going in and out of the EU. The US in certain states under the IRA are also driving supply. Japan last year have committed to a 10% blend mandate by 2030 and are trying to wrap their hands on SAF. And then this week, and I'm in Singapore at the air show right now, we had the Singapore government commit to a 1% blend mandate by 2026. So it's here to stay. And whether you're just looking at the mandated demand, we've got huge growth forecast. And if we look at the voluntary demand, which in the case of Australia is led by Qantas, who've committed to use 10% of SAF on all fuel by 2030, this is going to be at least a 700 million litre market of demand in Australia alone. Next slide, thanks. What's our focus and what opportunity do we see in the sugar industry? We're not farmers, we're not fuel distributors. We have relationships downstream with regards to the blending on that front, and we're focused on the manufacture of SAF for our offtake partner Qantas, which standing behind them is the world's largest aircraft manufacturer, as well as several large Aussie companies that are all committed to reduce their Scope 3 CO2 emissions and are looking to reap the benefits of SAF. As a business, we're technology agnostic, but it's got to be technology at commercial stage. We're aware, and we talk to some interesting 2G and other technologies to make ethanol and SAF here in Australia, but unless it's at commercial stage, we don't have the mandate to really back that at that point. And so while we work with a number of technology companies all around the world, all are generally with commercialized technology. And for the alcohol to jet tech, which is really what leverages ethanol from cane and other byproducts, LanzaJet's who we've most admired and partnered with. And I was pleased to say last week we signed a technology and engineering agreement with them, and they're here with me in Singapore. The process for the chemists out there is a simple 4-stage process. It takes anhydrous ethanol, it dewaters it, it then agglomerizes, which is really where the IP is, and LanzaJet have developed a new catalyst for that. And then we fractionate it, hydrogenate it, and effectively make a kerosene chain. With respect to the sugar industry itself and the opportunity for sort of alcohol to jet, we look at it as both ethanol and SAF production. We like sugarcane. I mean, it's a perennial crop. It's a great sequester of carbon. Probably many of you know it's a C4 plant, which means it's turbocharged to basically absorb carbon out of the atmosphere. And we get a lot of value in the carbon reduction in the fuel that we produce. Look, alcohol to jet plants need a lot of ethanol, huge volumes, far more than is produced from cane in Queensland today. And for that reason, we're sourcing our ethanol for this first plant from other agricultural byproducts and waste produced on the East Coast. However, like countries in Brazil, Thailand, and we've spent a lot of time with our Brazilian partners, Data Agro, we've seen that industry flourish, clearly with some favourable policy, but we see huge potential for the Australian industry to follow that. And so, where we can, we're keen to kind of assist the industry grow, whether that's partnering, whether that's offtake agreements, or whether that's outright investment. We see that opportunity to develop it over time. And look, there are nuances to the Aussie cane market, and our industrial manager, who's on the call and also able to answer questions, has been with me and our other team working on that. But we do believe the potential is there, and where it makes commercial sense to do so, we'll invest as required. And I guess one thing to sort of preempt, as I know it'll be a question that probably comes up at the end of this call. Yes, like many on this call, we're aware of assets and opportunities for investment and needing investment. Yes, we are looking at some of those, but we're not going to be in a position to comment on those at this time. Next slide, thanks, Madi. So I just wanted to briefly talk about our alcohol to jet project in Townsville. We've named it Project Ulysses after the iconic butterfly up there in the rainforest. We've sunk several $1 million into feasibility studies over the last 12 months. The project is looking to produce around 100 million litres, so only 18% of Qantas's demand by 2030 of SAF. and around 11 million litres of renewable diesel. It's a great decarbonisation story. Yeah, we reduce CO2 emissions on the fuel that we produce versus fossil fuel equivalent by around 71%. But it's also got some other benefits which we didn't really start out to see, but it's really unfolded. And that's, first of all, provides us with fuel security. So Townsville now being the Army headquarters and a huge investment going in up there, we provide that with fuel security. And on top of that, there's a huge investment that's required. These projects are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. It'll create about 1,000 jobs and 100 full-time employees. We're targeting first production by late 26, as every project that probably rolls into 27. But we're sanctioned with our partners and the board to move ahead into front-end engineering and design. And I think, I'd also flag, and for listeners on this call, we're about to announce engineering studies have kicked off with LanzaJet and Technip on the alcohol-to-jet plant. And that's an exciting milestone for this project to move ahead. So that's us. And by all means, if I'm not able to join for the rest of the call, my colleague Adam Douglas, who is known to many of you up in the Herbert region, he's able to answer any questions we've got. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Ed. I'll now pass on to Andrea.
Thanks, Maddie, and thanks everyone for having me here today. So similar to, so as a good follow-on to Ed, so I will talk about a different pathway to SAF, which is, so I work for Licella. We're an Australian technology development company. So we've developed a technology platform, which is a type of technology called hydrothermal liquefaction. And what does that mean? It's using water, so specifically hot pressurized water, to convert biomass residues such as sugarcane residues, bagasse, tops and trash into a biocrude. That biocrude is an intermediate product, which is a direct substitute for conventional fossil crude and can be co-processed to produce a range of biofuels and biochemicals, including SAF and renewable diesel. And so, so slightly different to alcohol to jet pathway in that we create a renewable crude. But what we're able to do by utilizing water is we get a very efficient conversion of the solid biomass into the liquid biocrude. It's highly flexible from a feedstock perspective. So we've done a number of feasibility work and R&D, bench scale upgrading of a variety of lignocellulosic feedstock, including sugarcane residues, tops and trash, and bagasse. The biocrude that we produce is very stable and energy dense, and we get a very high retention of carbon from the initial feedstock, the biomass, into the biocrude. And then from there, that is then upgraded into SAF and other products, as I mentioned, including, interestingly, green naphtha. So it provides a pathway to a range of low carbon, high value products, and really is helping to transition us away from fossil resources and create a new bio industry, and one in which Australia and Queensland specifically really has an opportunity to participate on a global leadership position. I think it's our opportunity to lose. And so, so next slide, Maddie. So I won't dwell on this too much. Ed outlined, there's a huge opportunity. SAF is a burgeoning global market, and what we need to consider, and I think going back to what Hywel said earlier, is that it's not just the end product we need to focus on. Feedstock and access to the volume of feedstock to service this exponentially growing market is critically important. So we need all available pathways, we need all available feedstocks, including sugarcane, and the huge opportunity in Australia. And what hydrothermal liquefaction, Licella's technology platform, can offer is a new and complementary pathway that is highly flexible and from a feedstock perspective, and therefore it is scalable into the future. Next slide, Maddie. So when we look at feedstocks and where the feedstock of today and what's available versus what we will need to meet those 2050 targets, global targets that are being set by both markets, country markets, and also by the aviation brands. in order to reach this huge demand, we need to tap into currently other resources or other feedstocks. And so sustainable crops and forestry and residues from cropping is going to be hugely important. And so, as I say, we need to have current approved pathways, but then also we need to look at what are the technology innovations that are coming online that are going to help us access other feedstock markets, including sugarcane, not just the sugar component, but also all of those residues. So the next generation of alcohol to jet, as well as hydrothermal liquefaction as a platform, you know, we're going to need all of these different technology pathways to access that feedstock for that market. Next slide, please, Maddie. And as I say, is, you know, the natural advantage of Queensland is we've got this huge strategic asset, you know, with the data that shows that, you know, within Queensland alone, there's 17 million tonnes per annum of residue, of biomass residue. And within that, 12 million of it is cropping residue. So, you know, there's a lot of things we still need to solve for, you know, the coming back to the farming practices and then research into different cane varieties. You know, I think there's a huge amount of motivation to solve for some of these. And you know, we've started some initial work on feasibility for different feedstocks, sugarcane residues. And so the more that we can understand what's available and how do we tap into this immense resource, the more that we can understand how to realise this opportunity. Next slide, Maddie. So what we currently have under development is we are working with the Department of Defence. We received a grant from the Department of Defence last year to do work towards a certification of our upgraded biocrude to SAF and renewable diesel. So what we're targeting is sugarcane residues, so both the tops and trash component, but then also the bagasse, and upgrading that into a biocrude to then make a certified aviation fuel, including fuel for defence, but also for commercial aviation and renewable diesel. So that body of work is ongoing at the moment. We have a commercial demonstration facility on the New South Wales Central Coast in Somersby, which we've scaled up over the past 15 years to its current commercial ready stage. And so our technology is on the cusp of commercialisation. So we've got two full-scale commercial facilities in the final stages of construction. So for biomass to biofuels in Canada, and then we do also have a side of the business which is advanced recycling of plastic. So this is going to be a really pivotal year for Licella in its Australian technology innovation, really making, you know, enabling a new production pathway for SAF. Next slide, Maddie. I think this is my last one. I just wanted to highlight here that, you know, it's critical. The word collaboration gets thrown around a lot, but I think that in this case, it's essential to moving this industry forward in Australia. To really realise the opportunity to have a new industry of global significance in transforming cropping residues into SAF, we need to enable a system-wide transformation where government and industry really come together along the whole value chain. And I think we can't underestimate the importance of involving the community and in this market, you know, for those that understand it a lot more than I do. I'm relatively new into looking at the sugarcane industry and sugar industry. But what is clear is that community is integrated at all of these stages and intimately connected with the feedstock. And so it's really important that we consider the social license and how do we build and maintain that, and how do we communicate the benefits and ensure that we're not creating barriers to progress when we know that we need to rapidly scale these opportunities once they do start to commence. And then critical to that as well, and you know what I'm interested to hear from David, who's also talking after me, is, you know, the importance of policy. And in Australia, in the absence of policy, I think, again, it's our opportunity to lose. How do we keep the feedstock onshore? How do we build this industry onshore? Because in the absence of a local industry, airlines who have global commitments to SAF will import it. So it's really the opportunity to do it here. And there is an opportunity to deliver significant job creation and economic growth. You know, as Ed said, these facilities, and this consistent with the feasibility study that we did in the Burdekin through the support of the Queensland Biofutures team, it demonstrated that, you know, one of these facilities could create at least 1,000 new jobs and more in the construction phase. It demonstrated a significant opportunity to convert residues into SAF, and it also supports, as was said, national fuel security, and helps to decarbonise a sector which contributes 2.5% to global carbon emissions. So it is one of the hardest sectors to abate in terms of decarbonisation, and really this is an opportunity for Queensland and the sugar industry to be a global force to be reckoned with. So I think it's a very exciting opportunity, and one that we're really committed to investing in Australia. That's it from me. Thanks, Madi.
Thanks very much, Andrea. We'll now pass on to our final panelist today, and that is David.
Thanks, Madi. For kind of high-level themes, if you like, to my kind of short presentation, I'll give a brief kind of statement around kind of ASMC's focus and where revenue diversification fits in. I'll talk about how the milling sector is well positioned to assist the Australian transition to a biofuel future. There are some risks, and I'll talk about them and the essential role of public policy in particular. And picking up on some of the themes of Andrea, what we think is a bit of a way forward to really realise these opportunities. So yes, the ASMC is highly engaged in revenue diversification. I think Ian mentioned we've got a Sugar Plus document out there. It's a blueprint out to 2040. It's heavily based and biased towards revenue diversification, and the ASMC works with members, it works with stakeholders, it works with government to continue to evaluate bioeconomy opportunities like SAF. We monitor commercial and policy developments here and abroad, and we work with like-minded, like SAFANs, and I'll talk about SAFANs in a moment. And we are actively advocating and work together to advocate to state and federal governments the need for supportive public policies to get these new industries up and running. So, yep, the sector is well positioned for biofuels. Most would know we are already making biofuels. We are already making ethanol. Wilmar has a 60 million litre facility up there, distillery up there in Serena. We need revenue diversification. We have a motive, if you like. We derived the very vast majority of our revenues from raw sugar. That is an inherently volatile market, subject to subsidies, seasonality impacts. Prices are very volatile. Long ebbs in the cycle are very, very tough for this industry to withstand, and we need to diversify our revenue stream into higher value-add products. We know the prices we're enjoying today won't last forever. We have feedstocks. Molasses is currently used for first generation ethanol production, which can be used for an alcohol-to-jet SAF play. But the bagasse, the tops and trash, as Andrea mentioned, the dunder, the mill mud can all be used now in these emerging technologies. So we can put a higher value use to these feedstocks if and when the technology is there and proven. We've got access to capital. The majority of mills in Queensland and Australia are now foreign owned. We've got access to capital. We've got global reach. We've got good technical expertise at our disposal. We can now do a lot of these and realise a lot of these opportunities if it all makes sense. So what's missing? Why haven't we, as an industry and as a sector, made these investments? And we haven't made a big investment in revenue diversification for quite a while in this industry. And I kind of put it down to kind of four things, specifically in relation to SAF. The first one is technology pathways, and for SAF, but also the liberalisation of the feedstock. And Hal mentioned that we can utilise tops and trash, we can utilise bagasse, but how do we do it? And what's the technology pathways to, for example, to liberalise bagasse and use less bagasse and make that bagasse available for other plays? I'll come back to that in a second. We've talked about 2 technology pathways today. There are at least 2 or 3, maybe other technology pathways to making SAF from sugar-related feedstocks. Anaerobic digestion to produce biomethane. There's a Fischer-Tropsch pathway there as well. So what do these look like? What's the commerciality? What do they look like at scale? What's the economics? And we need to do more work to understand this. So the sector is undertaking early stage evaluations of mill integrated and other technology pathways. So that work is occurring within the milling sector. Sustainability frameworks is something that we're keeping a close eye on. So how would the market and how would governments and how would consumers of SAF who purchase and want to fly an aircraft that has SAF as a fuel, how does it know that is actually SAF and it's certifiable and under a robust regime? And this is something that's kind of starting to weigh on our minds. We've seen some trends in Europe that is actually under the European Renewable Fuel Aviation Policy that is actually probably going to see molasses, which is a key feedstock for first generation ethanol in Australia, banned as a renewable feedstock. So that's something that we're keeping an eye on, and that decision was made on kind of food fuel kind of considerations, which we don't really have in Australia. So we want to ensure that the Australian approach is topped and tailored to Australian conditions. We currently make ethanol to the global RSB or Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials standard. That's a workable standard. The Corsia sustainability standard is also workable for us, and we know industry has made submissions to the Jet Zero Council about what would be a workable sustainability criteria for Australian feedstocks into SAF, and we'll continue to work with government around that. Probably the most complex issue we've got, I think, with SAF is the price gap. These fuels are more expensive than conventional aviation fuel. Estimates range between 3 to 6 times more expensive, and that in itself will create complexity going forward. So in the absence of a carbon price kind of swimming around the Australian economy that taxes those conventional aviation fuels and removes that price gap, there will be a role for government intervention. An economist will call it a market failure, and we're likely to get a market failure in the absence of good supported policies that reduce that price gap. So we are monitoring developments abroad. We like the idea of a mandated kind of regulated mandated demand. They work well overseas. Questionable whether they've worked in Queensland, but we need to learn from our experience with the E10 mandate. The low carbon fuel standard in the US is a good example where it's created scarcity for SAF. The market mechanism sits on top of the mandate. It creates a credit value, and that's tradable in the market, and that helps the economics of these SAF facilities. There's probably also going to need some support on the supply side as well. So a bit of discussion around production incentives, like a contract for difference scheme. I think that would work well, where government actually pays a bit of the price gap to assist the commerciality and the economics of a SAF facility getting up and running. R&D and commercialisation support will be required. As I say, some of these technologies are still fledgling and there is high risk, so we can see there maybe another market failure emerging, and government can play a role there. Mentioned Ed putting the facility in Townsville, working closely with the Australian Defence Force. That makes perfect sense to us. The ADF can underwrite some of the high cost early SAF development to allow the proponent to get scale and get those costs down. And Andrea mentioned consumer awareness. So what are the benefits of putting SAF into aircraft? What are the benefits of maybe paying a little bit more of a green premium on that trip to Melbourne or Sydney? And so we do need an education and incentive programs for airline passengers as well. There are regulatory uncertainties in this that are unique to this industry as well. I won't go into the detail. Issues around the Sugar Industry Act and the Federal Code of Product and the Federal Code of Conduct will also need to be addressed for us to invest. In terms of a way forward, you know, and our priority from ASMC is getting those policy settings right. So we would really like to see a suite of aligned federal and state government policies that really address the supply and the demand side and improve the commerciality and the economics of these projects getting up, at least for the early movers and at least for you know, the early stages of the industry's development. We will, as the milling sector, continue to evaluate and understand the commerciality of the various technologies. We'll work with proponents, we'll engage, we'll meet, we'll commission studies, and to inform the knowledge base and to help the mills and the members make the investment decisions, be that investment in 2G ethanol plants or integrated mill SAF facilities or the gas liberalisation or tops and trash liberalisation, whatever the investment may be, but we're keen to engage stakeholders and understand what it all means further. And lastly, completely agree with Andrea, community engagement, collaboration along the value chain is critical. And people may know that collaboration is in fact happening. There is a group called SAFANS, the Sustainable Aviation Fuel of Australia and New Zealand, meeting regularly. It's got the producers, it's got the oil companies, it's got the airlines, it's got the airports, it's got government. These conversations are happening. Policy is being formulated, and we are in the government cycle, if you like, in terms of being actively considered for policy support. So thanks very much.
Thanks, David. So we'll now move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. So just a reminder to submit your questions if you have them at the bottom of the screen here. I'll just note that Ed's actually had to leave us for another meeting at this point, but we do have Adam Douglas, who's the Industrial Manager at Jet Zero, to answer any questions for us. So if you want to pop your video and sound on, Adam. Perfect. Thanks so much for joining us to answer some questions on behalf of Jet Zero. So I'll have Ian start us off first with some questions around the feedstocks and market side of things.
Yeah, thanks, Madi. And we will we've got about 15 minutes for questions, so I'll pose some questions to the panel, and then we'll try and pick out also some questions from the chat. So please put your questions through the Q&A session at the bottom, and we'll try and get to them. So the first question is for Adam. So Adam, based up in Townsville, great. Obviously, you're looking at a variety of ethanol feedstocks to feed your process. What is it about sugarcane ethanol do you think that's attractive, or what are the things you're comparing between the different feedstocks you're comparing for your facility?
Yeah, so as Ed said, we're first and foremost a SAF producer. So we don't want to be cane farmers or ethanol producers, but we see that sugarcane is the largest fermentable biomass on the East Coast and certainly in Australia. So, you know, we centered our SAF business in Townsville for that reason. So we're very keen to work with the industry to generate ethanol from that feedstock.
No, great. And do you see, I mean, so to some extent it's the scale of the industry is what you're suggesting is one of the potential opportunities. Are there sustainability benefits from using sugarcane compared to other feedstocks as well?
Yeah, the sheer volume, the 200 megalitres of ethanol needed to make the SAF plant really can only come from the sugarcane. So we're sort of talking around 2.5 to 3 million tonnes of cane needed to actually deliver that sort of volume of ethanol to a SAF plant. And obviously the sugarcane industry is that sustainable regenerational crop, as was discussed by some of the speakers earlier.
Great, thanks. And Andrea, so you've done some work up in the Burdekin with farming groups and others, and looked at the feedstock available in the Burdekin region. So I think you were looking mainly at trash and bagasse from that area. So what did you learn from doing that study?
I think that we learned, that there's a really big opportunity, but it's not without its challenges. Certainly, we initially undertook the work in the Burdekin to focus on tops and trash, given that there's a large volume of that, and potentially some, whilst being used on field, could be redirected towards the bioeconomy for SAF. There are some, I think, additional research and questions that we need to solve for in terms of collection and pre-processing for it to be a suitable feedstock. And so we know that it's technically possible, and we've done it on small scale. But what we need to now explore further, I think, is the farming practices and the mechanisms by which we could actually convert that on a large scale to support a commercial facility for SAF. And so that's probably where one of the big learnings was for us, in terms of it's maybe not as straightforward as we initially thought, which is good. I mean, that's the reason you do feasibility studies, is to find out what you don't know. And so we are, with the certification of our technology towards SAF, we're looking at both bagasse and tops and trash as a feedstock, as well as lignocellulosic woody biomass more generally. So I think it's highlighted a significant opportunity, but also that there is more work to be done prior to being able to utilise particularly tops and trash as a feedstock, but certainly bagasse is more straightforward, I think, because the practices are already there and it's already being utilised. But again, the question is, how do we prove that it's a viable feedstock so that the mills and will be motivated to look at redirecting some of that feedstock away from purely energy into higher value use, such as SAF. So I think, to answer the question, it sort of it highlighted the opportunity, but then also that there's more work that needs to be done, particularly for tops and trash.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. So sticking with the theme of feedstocks and sort of moving over back to Hal, there's a question that's come through from the Q&A that asks about expansion of the sugarcane industry beyond traditional areas. And is there an opportunity for energy cane to maybe move into areas that are not perhaps as traditional sugarcane growing? Maybe they're frost susceptible, or maybe other drier areas or something. What are the opportunities for us to move, say, with some of these new cane varieties into maybe some horizontal expansion areas? Yes. You still with us, Hal? I don't think Hal liked the question. Are you still with us, Hal?
Yeah, I got you.
Hal Cook? No, that's okay. We might move on. We'll save that question, and hopefully Hal will pop back shortly. So David, so we did talk about, and you mentioned sort of looking at markets. You talked about the SAF opportunities, the scale of the SAF opportunities. What is it about the SAF market that you think will appeal to the sugarcane industry compared to maybe some of the other markets? Is it the scale, the sophistication, the growth? What do you think is about the SAF markets that will appeal to the sector to participate in?
Thanks, Ian. I think all those things. So firstly, we already make ethanol. So there's always a possibility that we could already inject ourselves into this, this sector currently. And they're separate discussions that will need to be had. Secondly, the emerging SAF technologies, that allows the industry to create kind of utilisation and optimisation of the mills themselves. So, for example, as I say, the versatility now that's emerging in terms of technology pathways, lignocellulosic options. That means we can use the bagasse, the tops and trash, the dunder, the mill mud. All this can be put through a 2G kind of fermentation ethanol process. So, there's always the possibility to create more revenue and higher value add revenues from the optimization utilization of those feedstocks. Thirdly, I would say, as you suggest, it's this could be a very, very large market. 600 to 700 million litres a year per annum of domestic demand. That's very, very large. If backed by a mandated kind of regulated demand public policy, that they're very good ingredients to, all things being equal, to really think about what the possibilities look like.
Great, thanks, David. I'm going to hand over to Madi to ask a couple more questions.
Yeah, so I'm just going to ask a few questions around the technology. So, Adam, as Ed mentioned in his introduction, Jet Zero made an exciting announcement last week. So, Project Ulysses is set to build an alcohol-to-jet fuel plant in Townsville with a production of 102 million litres of SAF annually. So this amount of blended SAF is said to meet the demands of the Cairns and Townsville airports while reducing CO2 emissions by 70%. So with the global SAF demand in the billions, can you describe why this project is significant? And looking forward, do you think the production scale will grow?
As Ed showed in his slide pack there, the global demand for SAF is going to be exponential as companies and countries either voluntary mandate the use. Like, for example, in Australia, they want 10% by 2030. We could turn all of the sugarcane from Townsville North into ethanol, turn that into SAF, and it would be half the usage of the Townsville and Cairns airport. So you can sort of see that as an end user close to Townsville and Cairns, there's certainly some upside for production of as much of this fuel as we can make. I don't know if that answers your question. It was a long question.
Yeah, no, it was repeating some of just the benefits, I suppose, to come from that announcement. But yeah, I think it's the point you had made was that the scale will need to continue to grow, but it will have benefits to those communities there where production is happening.
Yeah, correct. We see it as an opportunity for regional Australia to diversify the current sugar model. We're not saying it's going to be the saviour of the sugar industry, but it's certainly, we're getting on this green carbon reduction from a farming sector is only a good thing for North Queensland and the communities of growers that are sort of struggling with this one-dimensional sugar industry at the moment. So while it's burgeoning business, we see really good upside for rural Australia and farming sector. So we're really keen to work with the growing sector and the milling sector on how we can actually take some of the fermentable feedstock away from sugar crystal, turn it into ethanol. Project Ulysses that Ed talked about is only the first of a number of these plants in Australia that are going to need to be constructed to meet the demand. So, we're progressing, as Ed said, with feedstocks that aren't from sugarcane. But we see that this market's only going to get bigger, and we're going to continue to push and build the industry in Australia.
Yeah, great, thank you. So I'll move on to Andrea now. So you mentioned that in your self-introduction as well, that as part of the Queensland Biofutures program, Licella was able to convert sugarcane residues, so the tops and reach, into biocrude, and then upgraded that further, so into renewable kerosene, which once certified can be used as a SAF. So what are the benefits of this technology? You sort of touched on all that already, but is it ready to produce SAF at a meaningful scale?
Yes. So I would say, so as I mentioned, we're currently undergoing that body of work to pursue certification. So that is happening right now. What we have is a technology, a commercial ready technology platform. So the first commercial facility is being built in Canada, and that is for residues from the pulp and paper industry. So that'll be converting woody waste. So again, we're targeting specifically waste and residue feedstock. So that's probably the key difference between our conversion pathway and alcohol to jet, is that we're not utilizing, it's just different. So we're taking the biomass, the lignocellulosic biomass, to a bio crude, which is then upgraded. So one of the key benefits is it's got a low carbon intensity, the process, and a very high conversion rate of the carbon from the feedstock to the end product. And again, those yields and the carbon retention actually improves on upgrading. So we're able to tap into a much bigger pool of feedstock, whether that's residues via cropping or forestry or municipal solid waste. And so, as Adam mentioned, I think, like future-proofing the feedstock strategy, and that's, both applicable to when we just focus on the sugarcane industry, but also other feedstocks as well, is, as much, we want to utilize as much of the residue as we can, because we believe that that's what's going to deliver both like economic return, but then also the volumes that's needed for this industry.
Yeah. No, that's good to differentiate that point here, that you're both, Jet Zero has also mentioned sugar byproducts as something they're interested in, but it's good to differentiate there, I think. So I'll pass back to Ian now. So to wrap us up with a final question, because we're almost at the end here, just around the challenges and enablers in this space.
Yeah, thanks, Madi. So just we've only got a couple of minutes left. So I thought one last question to David Rinn. So David, you talked a lot about some of the challenges and some of the things that the industry can support in the way of policy incentives, etc. So there's a bit of work to do, obviously, to get the policy piece right. What should we in the sugar industry, in the SAF industry, what should we be doing to come together to sort of advance that sort of policy opportunity? Because clearly that price gap that you mentioned is really critically important. But what are the things that we should be doing to advocate for and advance the opportunity for SAF in the industry?
Yeah, so great question. I think we need to be aligned, I think, first and foremost, as a value chain, to this equation. And as I say, the SAFANS group do work and to achieve that, meeting regularly, to throw these issues around and develop those policy positions that we know will get those early movers up and running to allow scale. So it really is getting in behind consistent messaging from industry and continuing to do what we're doing, to see the commercial side of the market continue to advance, go to feed, commission studies, work up the feasibility, to be able to demonstrate the commerciality and feasibility of this sector going forward, with or without public assistance, public policy assistance, is what we should be doing. So I think we're doing the right thing. I would like to see a little bit more urgency in government's response, to be honest. The rest of the world is moving much quicker than us. Europe, the US, other countries like Thailand, Brazil is decades ahead of Australia in terms of getting their biofuels industry up and running. So let's move with a bit more haste. Let's start the public policy discussions and development now. And let's give some signals to the market that Australia is going to be a serious biofuel producer.
Thanks, David. And back to Madi to wrap us up.
So that's all we have time for today. It's been a great conversation. So thanks to each of our panelists. We've got Hal, Ed, Adam, Andrea, and David. So thank you all for coming to the first webinar in the Bioeconomy in Focus series. Our next webinar will be held on the 27th of March, and we'll be looking more at the future foods and precision fermentation space with some more exciting panelists. We've got them on the screen here. So this concludes the webinar. I'd like to thank Ian O'Hara for acting as co-chair for this event, Jane Trindle for your co-supervision, and SRA for the funding of this project. So please feel free to contact me via the email on the bottom of the screen with any additional questions. If you didn't get something answered, I can try to pass that on to our panelists and get you a response. And thanks again for coming, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.